Greetings everyone, and welcome to the 92nd session of the online Optom Learning Series or OOLS. Let me introduce to you our speaker for today. So, today we have Optom Keyur Savla. He finished his Bachelor's of Optometry from the Lotus College of Optometry, India, and currently he is a PhD candidate at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. He is pursuing his PhD in toric multifocal contact lenses and something in optics. But more importantly, he has been invited second time onto our platform. He had a session done on Demodex blepharitis. So people who are unaware of that, please go ahead and watch his session on Demodex blepharitis. And not only that, but he's also a team member of Online Optom Learning Series. He's the scientific writer and content creator, whereby he, puts up all the thoughts together, references out all the thoughts of whatever the speaker has spoken about, and makes it easy for you guys to go ahead and do some further reading of all the sessions, what have been covered up in Online Optom Learning Series. So welcome Keyur again onto the platform. It's not actually a welcome, it's our platform, all of us, but just formally welcoming you. And today Keyur is going to take us through the basics of conducting research in optometry, what we should be aware of. So this talk is not only for students, but as clinicians, we will definitely have some takeaways from this talk. So the time is yours, Keyur.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining at this hour, whichever part of the world you are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am so glad to be a part of this today. And without dwelling a lot on other topics, I will start right away on basics of conducting research in optometry. Before I get started, I want to make sure that whatever I'm talking about are my views and opinions that I have learned over the years and developed. There is not a single product that I endorse in the slides, and I have no financial gains from any of the named products, if there are any, during the PowerPoint. All the images are representative and available on Google, so that's been my source for the images for this presentation. So, having that cleared out, the objectives of the talk are, since most of you are students or optometrists in clinical settings, it's the basic aspects of research, and that is what are the basic things that one needs to know or cover before you dive into any research. And the process of literature review, which is, I think, what is primarily people struggle with most. And then what is the research proposal beyond that? People who are already in optometry settings like, clinics or hospitals, how to work with collaborations, and the last is publishing. This is probably the most dreaded area of research, and probably also the only rewarding aspect of finishing the whole thing is that you will be able to publish your work. So before we get started, how about you all let me know what is the first step for conducting research, or what do you think is the first step for conducting research? And that's our first poll.
Majority of them, 52%, almost half of them think that finding the research question should be the first step in conducting research. Whereas a very neck to neck, probably if I can say, is finding the right advisor and literature review is the second one, but none of them think that location is that important.
So thank you everyone for answering that question. And this is, I expected this kind of a split, especially among students, because finding the location, that was, of course, everyone knew that that is not a problem. But finding the right question versus literature review, that has obviously always been debated. And the advisor, the academic settings that we are in, finding the right advisor is definitely very important. But at the same time, internationally or across the globe, it is understood that you have to match the advisor to your research rather than the research to your advisor. That may not often happen where we are at, but That is the process that you think of the topic, and then you choose the advisor that can help you with that topic or that area of expertise. So I'll go ahead and get started with what are the few basics of research. And so research is nothing but a systematic investigation and or a study in order to establish facts or reach conclusions. And so this can be about anything at all. And I'll give you an example in a short time as to how something can be conducted even in a clinical setting without a lot of work. Um, and the first thing you will need is a scientific question or an area of inquiry that you're trying to study or understand. Um, One of the things that is often overlooked is the need for approvals or resources. You might think of an amazing question. You will have the patients that you are going to study, but you also, if you want to publish in the future or if you want that data to be available for the improvement of science, then you have to have the necessary resources or approvals from certain governing bodies that are in your area so that you can say that this is legit or validated research. And lastly, it is proposal to publication. So proposal is the first stages where you start the research primary, and publication is where it is considered that it ends. So to start with, what is a scientific question? And that is, it's a valid inquiry into the field. So why is it a valid inquiry? You could come up with any sort of question as to why is Keyur here today, but that is not a valid inquiry into the field of optometry. And so you need to come up with a valid inquiry into the field that is either not being studied before, or even if it has, it hasn't been studied in that population particularly, and it should be in a form of a testable hypothesis. By that, I mean you should have some kind of intervention or some kind of observation that you can do, and you can draw some conclusions from that observation or intervention, saying, okay, if we do this, for example, I work with Demodex, so if I'm treating patients of Demodex with tea tree oil, what is the outcome versus if I don't treat them at all, what is the outcome? So you need to have some kind of a valid inquiry of such form to come up to have a scientific research. And this is probably the first step or where research actually begins. And some of the resources or sources for these kind of activities can be scientific publications, books, experts in the field, conference and talks, and you can always time into OOLS for any other information that you need. But yeah, these are some of the places. It can be difficult sometimes to have access to scientific publications, especially if you're not in an academic setting, if you are in a clinic or a retail outlet. And it is always an option, and at least from what I have learned, is to reach out to your local optometry school or group and see if they have some sort of a library, and see if you can have access to that library for a minimal paid fee, if possible. That is an excellent source. If not, Google is also an excellent source. There's a lot of information out there that is going open access, by which I mean a lot of scientific writers or authors are publishing their work for everyone to view rather than just having it limited to the journals or schools, etc. So this is where the process starts. And once you have a question in mind, what you're going to need is some sort of a literature review. And that is our second part of this. So before I speak on what and how about literature reviews, this is our second poll for the day. As why is literature review important? What do you think is the need for a literature review?
Yeah, Keyur, about 63% think that it is important for all of the above reasons what are mentioned, and 30% think it is what is important is because we need to know what is about the topic. So that's the understanding of audience.
So that is an excellent answer. I guess you guys are already experts at how to start with the research. So yes, primarily it's all of the above. Um, but also one of the main reasons to do a literature review at the start is to learn about what is known about the topic. And science is pushing the edge of the understanding of the topic forward. So if we know something, we are just going to add a little bit, a very small fact or a very small conclusion to what is already known, and that is pushing the edge forward. So we want to know what is already known, so we can ask the next question or the missing link or the next need for the people or patients, and also finding the experts, current experts in the field. This is important, especially if you're not in an academic setting and you have a limited scope of, you have like an open wide scope of advisors. This would help you narrow down to where the experts lie or who is probably the experts in the schools closer to you, etc. You can read their work and you'll be like, okay, these people are working in this area. I should perhaps reach out to them and see if they are interested in something like this. It is a part of the final publication. That is, if you end up actually publishing your work that you've done, then you will need the literature review that you've done to support your hypothesis and all the ideas that you've had. And hence, at least if you're into long-term research, or even if you know you're going to do it, I always recommend students, especially, and practitioners as well, that you keep a track of what your literature review was, because by the time you finish your literature review and then you go ahead finish your research, it's going to be a gap of 6 months, 1 year, or even longer. And at that point you will be thinking about, I thought of this and there was a paper I read about it, but I don't remember what it was or where it was, and you'll spend hours going back and forth trying to find that particular citation. So it's always important to keep track of your literature review. With that said, literature review is nothing but um, a survey of scholarly resources. And it is what you're trying to survey, is what you're trying to understand what scholarly resources or information is out there. And by scholarly resources, I mean something that has been validated or peer reviewed or agreed upon by the scientific community. So if you don't know, Google has a Google Scholar option that will allow you to review scholarly resources. If you just go in Google and type something, it is hard sometimes to say if the information has been validated or agreed upon scientifically, or is there any backing. But if you use Google Scholar, then it is a part of the literature that is out there. And it's not just someone who got up one day, decided to create a web page and write some information and post it. On Google Scholar, you probably find articles that have been peer reviewed and published, and that helps you determine the authenticity or validity of an idea. Having said that, I don't mean to say that every peer reviewed article is correct or every peer reviewed article's conclusions are correct. Scientifically or statistically, since we take the p value of 0.05, that means theoretically 1 out of every 20 conclusions that is out there for any kind of science is wrong. And that is also the case with optometry. So if you think of something that you've read and you find that at least online that is not the information you're finding, then it could be wrong. And that is also a valid research question, saying you observe such and such in your patients, but the literature out there states otherwise. So that is a question for scientific inquiry. Having said that, we base optometry research is not new research. Optometry research has been conducted for thousands of years, or not thousands, but hundreds of years. And we stand on the shoulder of giants. That is, this information we understand or learn from previous researchers. And that is a very important acknowledgement to how the scientific process is. You have to understand that if you are going to state anything about your work, you have to respect and acknowledge what has been done in the field previously. And only on those bases can you build or push the edge of knowledge further. It is generally a part of the thesis if you're writing a final thesis or research paper to connect your work to the existing information. This is how you say, okay, this is what was known. We had this question which was uncertain or new, or even though it was known, we weren't sure of the conclusions, and that's why we did this research. It is a tool to identify the current edge of knowledge in the field or topic. We've spoken a lot about this at this point. When you do a review, you don't have to write it ideally. So some people, especially if you're into long-term research, or even if you're in a hospital setting and you have say no deadline to finish the research, if you do a review and there is no other review available on the particular question out there, you can just write it and publish a review itself, and that is a scholarly contribution. And though it is not independent scientific research, it's definitely a scholarly contribution. Because imagine if someone out there looking for the same topic, they have to go through all the work that you have done just to reach a conclusion that you have found out, okay, this question has been answered in so and so manner by all these papers. If you've done a review and you realize, okay, I had to read like 20, 30 papers just to realize this one fact in many different ways, you can write it if you want to, but doing a literature review doesn't necessarily mean you have to write it. One of the other things is like who or when you should do a literature review. And if there is anyone out there who wants to learn more about a topic, you have realized you don't know anything about it. And this was true almost until 2 years ago about Demodex blepharitis. When I started studying it, and I had not learned it in optometry school, or it wasn't a part of the curriculum because it wasn't a condition. And a lot of you out there who are practitioners currently will also face the same issue. If someone comes in with Demodex blepharitis, and even though you graduated 3 or 4 years ago, you do not know about it because it wasn't a part of the textbooks at that point. So that is something that you can learn from literature review. And I realized that there isn't one out there, especially for tree tree oil, which is a mainstay of treatment. And that's when I decided to do a literature review on Demodex blepharitis, not only to enhance my understanding, but to summarize the information out there for the practitioners in a very readable format wherein they could just read that one paper and understand, okay, this is where we are with that treatment. So it can be a clinician, student, academician, even a patient can sometimes do a literature review if they are struggling with a question and no doctor seems to be able to provide a sufficient answer. Anyone can actually do a literature review and publish that. It is scientifically valid because it will go through the peer review process most likely. Uh, we have been doing literature reviews since we started to read. So the idea is that what is literature review or how do I go about it? So whenever you started to read, that is basically a literature review because there is a literature out there. So even though you were reading Sleeping Beauty or Pinocchio or whatever storybooks you read, and you reviewed that to understand the information or those thoughts or ideas. So yeah, so don't be scared of the idea of literature review. Since you've started reading, you've been reviewing the literature that has already been printed to understand where we currently stand at. And the final point again is understanding the levels of knowledge as to we have been doing literature reviews since we started to read, but however, when we were young, we were understanding how words are formed, like so 3-letter word, 4-letter word. Beyond that, when we started reading our textbooks in school, we realized, okay, what are the history facts and what are the scientific basics, like principles of motion, etc. In college, when we were in optometry, we learned about how eyes work and Culstrand's eye or schematic eye, etc. That is also literature review when you try to study those. And now you would be doing the same thing, but for topics that haven't been commonplace facts or not printed in textbook yet. So what are the steps that you need to conduct a literature review? First is you need to select a topic or at least an area, say contact lens or something like that. And then, maybe you're interested in scleral contact lenses. Once you do that, you need to search the literature. So you would have to use Google Scholars or publications, journals out there to search the current topics in that area or the current research in that area. Sometimes students do have a question in mind to start with, or practitioners have a specific question in mind to start with, and you can jump into searching the literature directly for that specific question. If you do not, often in optometry school, the concern is, well, I don't have a scientific question. Give me a question that I can research on. That can also be found through literature review. So you find the area that you're interested in, and then you read. Generally, in the paragraph right before the conclusion, you will find an area that the author will say, we found so and so. However, more work needs to be done in this area, or this is not understood, and we are unclear on that. Those are your edge of knowledge or gap in understanding, and those are your scientific questions that you can actually develop upon. The next is to read and analyze. This part, I cannot stress how important it is. And if you don't do it well, you're going to end up with a research topic that someone else has already done, and you're just repeating their idea. So you want to read the papers, and don't be lazy about it. I've been lazy about it, but don't be lazy about it. You want to read that papers and analyze the information. So what are your main takeaways from a particular paper? Develop an argument as to each idea in optometry or any other scientific literature will have two sides as to why this versus why that, especially if you're talking about the latest information. And so you have to develop an argument of what you think, whose argument do you agree on and why. And that is very important, especially if you are putting together a proposal for a committee. As most of you are students, you will have to present your proposal at some point, and they will question you on these ideas as to why do you think this is correct versus that. And that's where you have to develop an argument saying, okay, this is why I believe that this idea or this hypothesis should be tested instead of that, etc. And of course, writing the review is an option, before, like, after you've done it. But yeah, that is also an optional idea. But it is worst case scenario. I would recommend keeping track of the papers that you've read and the ideas you found from each paper. So make sure at least you keep track of that, because if you ever go back, it's going to be a lot of work. But first, know the purpose of the review and start with that aim in mind. If there is a specific scientific question that you want to get it answered, or is there a question you are looking for in that review, and start with that aim in mind instead of just being like, okay, today I'm going to take up this journal and read through all the papers in that journal. That is not a very focused way to understand the current literature. So some tips to do a literature review is know the area or topic or the scientific basics. So if you're going to study contact lenses or soft contact lenses, know what are the soft contact lenses, what are the different issues surrounding soft contact lenses, who is it worn by, how is it fit, etc. You just can't be like first month of optometry school and you really want to do a literature review on orthokeratology. That's not how it works. You have to know the basics, because otherwise you're going to be lost in jargons when you're reading these papers. Learn to use databases. So Google Scholar especially, and any other databases that you have access to, will have Boolean logic systems, which is nothing but using and or. So if you're looking contact lenses and myopia, so to use the word and in capitals, that will search out only papers that will help you with contact lens and myopia both. Or if you use the word or, then either one of them will show up. Otherwise, when you do a Google search, it will give you 10,000 results, and no one has time to read 10,000 papers. So you need to use the Boolean logic, and you have to learn how to use the databases. And I'm pretty sure you can come up with a lot of YouTube videos for these points. Start with a systematic review. These are the highest level of reviews done, or the highest approved reviews. These are called, especially in optometry, they come from Cochrane Eye. It's an organization that guides people how to do systematic reviews. Any sort of review is good, but a systematic review is even better. So look in if there is a systematic review on your topic. That will save you a ton of time, and any argument you place from a systematic review is very much a defense itself. make your work recent. If your topic is hot, like contact lenses or something like that, then make sure that your references or your review or papers that you're reading are recent and not like 10-15 years ago, because people may have moved ahead or on from those ideas. And identify key ideas from a paper. This people often struggle with when they are learning initially, and in a few moments I will speak about how to do that, and read specific papers on key ideas itself. So there's a lot of content out there, but don't get bogged down as to how much information is out there. But read specifics on your key ideas, and don't waste time reading things that don't make a lot of sense. And summarize the information. I use tables specifically in Excel, a simple Excel format of summarizing who was the author, what did they do, who were their patients, what were their conclusions, will save you a ton of time later on. And of course, last is to write the review if needed. So, as I said, understanding the anatomy and physiology of a research paper will help you identify papers much more quickly and understand the key ideas. And so you don't have to spend like 30-40 minutes reading each and every word written by the author, unless you're going to cite that paper or it's a key paper in your work. You just need to review it quickly so that you can understand if that paper, even you need to bother reading it further or not. And this probably takes 2 to 5 minutes once you are well versed with the literature in the area. So always first read the abstract and understand the PICO, which is nothing but what is the patient population or problem that the author is trying to address. The intervention stands for I. So what are they trying to do? Like, are they trying to treat? Or are they trying to observe? Comparison, who is their control group? So is there a group that is not getting the same treatment, or someone in the past who did not benefit from the treatment, etc. And the outcome, which is their conclusion, what did they observe? If you read the abstract, you get these four and one of them doesn't fit to what you were looking for, then that paper is something you don't want to read right away, at least. If it does fit what you're looking for, then you go to the introduction. And in introduction, I generally end up reading the first and the last line of each paragraph and just the last paragraph to get an idea of what they are talking about, if I'm missing any already available knowledge out there. In the methods, I primarily aim for the images first. Look at the images because they tell you a lot of the story without you having to read through all that text. And then if you need to, you can go through the who is the patient, what is the intervention, comparison, and outcomes, these details, how they are measured, etc. If you need to, sometimes I would skip it in case if I just want to look at their results. And you can also read the inclusion exclusion criteria. The next is results, and then again results, images first, always images first. So go through the images. The graphs will tell you a lot of the story that the paper is trying to give in words. And after that, if you feel the need that the images don't convey the ideas and just specific results, you can read the first and last lines of each paragraph, and that will give you a gist of what the author is talking about. Discussion, again, it will start with results or describing what the results are. Then it will move on to studies that have same results. This is where you can look for what to read next in the area if you're interested. Then it will talk about studies with contrasting results. So studies that don't agree to what they have found. Then any other theories or thoughts and relations or explanation to what they have found in these results. And last is the limitations, where you can learn about what next needs to be done. And this is where you might find your research question or topic if you're looking for one. And lastly, conclusion. So this, if you actually read just these few lines, it will take 5 to 7 minutes max, even when you're starting. And you can quickly tell if this paper is worth your time or not, and if you actually want to spend 30 minutes digging down deep into it. So that is a brief anatomy of physiology of the research paper, and it's very helpful, especially when you're getting started and you have tons of papers to read, but you don't have the time to do that. The next is resources and approvals. So internet, of course, in today's world is going to be your biggest resource. Local institutes do reach out and make sure that you stay in touch if there are any in your vicinity. Those can be very, very good resources. If you can network and find contacts there, that will save you a ton of time and make your life a lot easier. Apart from that, as optometrists, I believe most of us would be doing research on human subjects, and it's very important, even when it comes to publishing or just from ethics, to have human subject protection protocols as to what you're going to do, having a consent, etc. These ideas may seem vague to start with, but especially when it comes to publication, these are something that are critically looked at to see if you've done an ethical activity and if that can be published or approved by the scientific community at large. And so, if you don't have expertise in these areas, try and look for someone who does and who can help you with it. Other than that, if you do have expertise in these areas, then make sure that your scientific argument and what you're doing for to the subjects are very well laid out or thought through. And the last is proposals. You will have to write a proposal and submit to a scientific community like local institute, etc., to say that, okay, this is what we're going to do, this is how we are going to do it, do you approve of this idea? And once they do that, then the research is ideally considered valid, because otherwise anyone can do any sort of research like people did back in the World War days. And of course, we don't have publications from that because that is not an approved method of doing research. Humans are not guinea pigs, and we should treat them as fellow humans. So these are some important points that you have to understand about approvals. Um, each area will have its own strategy and understanding, and you need to understand how your area works on an international level, though. However, you will need all of these to get anything published or get your work out there. If you're doing case studies, that is a different story completely. You might at the most need just approval from the patient itself, wherein the patient, you tell them in written format, you explain it to them that we are going to look at this, etc. This is how we're going to do it. These are the steps we'll be taking, and probably it will be a part of their regular clinical care itself. So you can assure them that nothing extra from what they have been going through will be done to them. And if you do that, then yeah, you have all the approvals that you need. One of the recent examples I like to give is um, it has been debated, or at least when I was in school, it was taught that when you prescribe soft contact lenses to a new patient for the first time, they can either wear them gradually, say 2 hours on day one, 4 hours on day two, 6 hours on day three, 8 hours on day four, and so on and so forth. Or some practitioners would at that point as well prescribe it. Okay, yeah, sure, wear them today completely, and then come back in tomorrow if you have issues, or wear them tomorrow for the full day. And there was no scientific evidence out there stating one way or the other. And this could have been conducted in anyone's retail outlet or anything like that. But apparently, either no one thought of doing it, or no one thought that it was important enough to publish. And we recently got a paper published in that area, wherein all we did was whatever contact lenses patients we were fitting, we suggested them one way or the other. We did tell them that there is another option, but we don't know for sure, and that's why there is no harm in either option. And when they would come for their follow-ups, we would ask them to fill out a survey stating, okay, what was their experience like? And of course, if you are a new contact lens patient, if you have a new contact lens patient, I hope you guys are calling them back for follow-ups. And once we did that, we had information as to which one was better against the other, and that's all. That was as simple as that. We had to compile that follow-up survey and publish our results. And so it's that easy. Or it's If you just think through the basics, there are always things that we don't know, or we don't understand, or we are not sure of. So yeah, but again, in that process, you need to reach out to your local school, etc., and see if you can get your research proposal approved by them. That will make your life much easier. The next, I'll quickly go through proposal writing. So this is our next poll as to research proposals need to be written by who exactly, who should be writing research proposals.
So majority of them think all of the above must do that, followed by optometry students and practicing optometrist and faculty advisor. So that's the hierarchy.
Thank you everyone for answering that poll. Yes, basically any or all of the above should or need to write research proposals, depending on who is taking charge of the research. Optometry students, of course, we believe that we should be the first ones in the gun of like line of fire, because that's what we tend to do when we start with. And yes, so anyone who wants to conduct research can literally write research proposals. And if you are doing the research and you are the main person in charge, then yeah, you have to be the one writing it. Uh, and so, what is a research proposal? It's nothing but a document proposing a research project as to what are you going to do, how you're going to do it, etc. There are different levels of it. At the level where you are at, you should find out what is the level. So, if you're doing like an NIH funded 5 or 10 years research, that's going to be a completely different style or level of research proposal. Whereas if you're doing like a 3 or 4 months project in your optometry school, there's going to be a different style or level. Consists the same basic ideas as to how you're going to do it, what is the intended outcome, what are the tests you're going to perform, but the details may differ. And usually request permission. It's the idea is to usually either request for permission, that please can you allow me to do this research, ethically approve it, or to request for some sort of funding that I need so and so amount to do this, etc. So that is the basic idea of research proposal. What is the importance of this research proposal? It's a planning template. It's to make sure that you've thought through all the problems you will come across in your research and how you're going to tackle them. It helps assess the pitfalls and shortcomings for a project. So if there is something that doesn't make sense, if you write it down or if you do a research proposal, you will know it before you start the research. Unless like you go ahead, you start it, you're like, okay, I'm going to do so and so research, and then 1 month into it, you're like, oh, we don't even have enough of those kind of patients to actually have a successful research proposal or research in this area. Next is assessment of the knowledge and understanding. Some optometry schools and even the community at large would try to understand how far you understand the topic, and that's why they would have the research proposal done wherein you can do your literature review. One section would be a literature review, so that they will know, okay, this person knows what they are talking about. And lastly, it provides an estimate of the workflow, resources, and time required. So you will be able to plan out and say, okay, this is going to take 6 months, or this is going to take 6 years, or this is how we're going to do it, and this much money it will take. It's at least an estimate before you start with the research. So writing a proposal, get a proposal template or example from whatever body you are submitting your research proposal to. So yeah, if you are say, submitting to LBPI for a research, then get a template or an example from them. Each one will have a different way of doing it, though the basics will be, they'll ask for your aims or objectives, the scientific reasoning and innovation. What is your reason behind it? This is where the literature review comes into it. Three is the impact and application, as to how is this going to help the community, or if you do know the answer to this question, how will you apply it? Proposed methods is where you're going to do the measurements. Do you have the machines, and etc. Inclusion, exclusion, as to who are going to be your patients, whom are you going to get rid of. Statistical details, especially sample size. A lot of students struggle with this, and rightly so, because we are optometrists, not statisticians. We are not supposed to know everything about this. It's a detailed area. However, having said that, you have to have a rough estimate, and there are ways to calculate it, and you can do this online very easily. The next one is expected outcomes. What do you think the outcome will be? You might be wrong. That's why we're doing the research. We don't know the outcome, but what do you expect your outcome to be? And the resources and timelines. These are generally some of the ideas that will be in your research proposal. But yeah, it can be any way, organized in any form or sense. Sometimes it will just be a fill in the blanks for just these things, and sometimes it could be a 10-page long proposal if need be. So yeah, find a template so you're not wasting your time doing something that is not necessary. Getting keywords and phrases right. This is important, especially if you're submitting the proposal to a review body. Referencing and citations. this is the most important part. I cannot stress on how important this is. We have the ideas, but we do not cite or reference where we gotten our ideas from. um, Answer the most common issues. There are some common issues like, do you have enough patience? Do you have enough money? Or do you have enough time? How are you going to find time to do your research? Especially when you are a student or you are already seeing patients in clinic at your hospital. These are very common issues, and just answer them in your proposal forefront so that the reviewing body knows you have thought about it and you are ready to tackle them. Stick to the guidelines. If they do provide a template or guidelines, stick to it. Don't go above or beyond, because that's what they're looking for and you don't want to waste your time or their time. Know your committee and know their strengths, especially for students. If you know who is going to be reviewing it, know the committee and know their strengths. If on your committee there are four people who are, experts in contact lenses, you don't need to waste a lot of your time trying to explain the contact lens ideas, or why orthokeratology is important, etc. They already know that. They don't need to be told about that. So focus on something that they don't know. If you know your committee, use that to focus your research proposal in certain ideas that the committee might not know or you want to defend, and strike a balance between the expert and the novice in you. Also, remember, if your committee is going to be reviewing, they haven't read all the papers that you have read. And they don't know everything that you know at that point, because you've read all these papers in the past 30 days or 15 days, etc. So you, in a way, you are an expert in that niche for those few moments. So you must strike a balance between the expert, that is you, all you know this, and the novice that you are starting your research and they know better than you. So don't throw around ideas that you've just read about. At the same time, don't make it so simplified that it appears that you don't know anything. It is a it's a knife's edge walk, and yeah, it needs work and practice, but you can definitely do that over time. So, having said all of this, I think these are some of the key places to get your research started. If you manage to finish the proposal, then you probably hashed out where you're going to do it, how you're going to do it, etc. And once you've done that, or if you've not done that so far, one of the ways to do it is collaborations, and that is what I'm going to speak about next. But before we move ahead, that is our next poll. Um, this comes especially for publications. So I wanted to know if every author on a publication should approve of the work for a paper to be published. So if you've written a whole paper, every author on that paper, should they know everything that has been done and how it's been done? Yes or no?
About 84% thinks that yes, true, it is necessary for all the authors involved should be approved, and about 16% says it's not really necessary.
So yeah, most of you are correct. Every author, at least in the field of optometry, every author on the publication should approve for anything that has been said or done in the paper, and they are, like, held responsible or liable for that scientific information. However, there are some fields out there that still have the ideas of wherein the dean or the principal of the school is put on the publication just because they are the dean, and that's how that field works. So yeah, in that case, they are not expected to know that detail. But in optometry, every author that is put on a publication should know the work in detail as to what has been done or how it's been done, and should approve of it. Having said that, this is where collaborations come into, is you need to have expertise in all the areas that you're working with. You need to have statistical expertise. You need to have experts on methodology, etc. Though these words may sound big and fancy, they are not that fancy. In some sense, for my own research, I am an expert on statistics and methodology, but of course, I have experts in the other areas, um, like clinical expertise, etc. I do have those experts to help me. So yeah, you need to have at least two or three of the expertise, and if you don't have a few, that your research is going to need, then you should seek out those people. There are a lot of fellow experts in the community itself, so you don't need to reach out to a school or something like that. You can just reach out to your friends whom you know were into research or in optometry school, did a lot in that area. And yeah, I often still call my friends from optometry school whom I knew did a research in a particular area when I'm like, okay, people are talking about binocular vision, and that's a topic I dreaded and did not understand very well. So I call up my friends. Hey, I'm looking at this. Someone says there could be a baby problem. Can you help me understand if there is a problem in this area? And where should I look for more information, etc. So yeah, if you don't have the expertise, collaborate. Resources, you need to have all the resources you need before you start. You don't want to start and realize, okay, I'm running out of this, or I don't have this machine. And if you don't have something, again, collaborate with someone who does in your vicinity, who can provide that for you. And sometimes if you are like offering them authorship or this publication and it's a well thought of plan, if you just need, say, an OCT for these patients, they'll probably even do it for free. I've seen that happen in the past. So reach out and find out if that is something. If it's just going to be like 20 subjects or 10 subjects over a span of a year, I'm sure a lot of the places who have those kind of machines will be like, okay, we are interested in this. Let's do it. Look at local optometrists. Don't forget the power of local optometrists. Find out people who are in the hospitals around you. See what they are seeing. Sometimes these are the people who actually will catch the diseases first or problems first. So have a network of local optometrists and look at them and see if they are interested. A way to do collaborations is to go to conferences often enough. Virtual conferences aren't, in my opinion, the best way to do it. But for now, please stay home and stay safe and do it virtually. But other than that, go to conferences in the area that you want to work in and meet new people or meet people in that expertise and see how, if they are interested or if they need your help at something. Look at local schools. I cannot stress the importance of this. Schools of optometry have immense resources, especially because they are designed for the students. So if you're a practicing one, or if you've graduated from your school and in the same area, just reach out, say, hey, I'm still interested in doing this. Can I help? Can I have a student who would be interested to do this? This is the idea. I can guide them, etc. If not, you can ask for access to the library for a minimal fee, etc. International collaborations. This is often tricky, but also not impossible. So if you are in a clinical or a hospital setting, a hospital that is big enough, sees a lot of patients, etc. International collaborations is something you can do. You witness something or you observe something, or you read about a treatment that is being done in the US, but you don't have access to. You can often reach out to them. Hey, I read about this paper, and this is an excellent treatment, and I would like to apply it to my patients. Can you help us with getting the machine, or can you help us with getting the device needed for this? And they would often be very grateful for that, because it's also promoting their device or machine or getting more data. So you'd be surprised as to how easy that is sometimes. And the key to collaboration is networking. So make sure you network well. Lastly, public publishing. So I know, after, if you have come this far, if you've done your proposal, if you've collaborated, etc., conducting the research should not be difficult. Data collection is, though, the longest part of any research. It's one of the easiest if you planned everything out well. Something that students and optometrists dread after is to publish. And remember, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. If you don't publish your results anywhere, no one will know about it, and it was as if you never did that research. So if you're even looking at case studies, etc., you need evidence and documentation. You need photographs of the patients, you need their consent, etc. So make sure, if you have a question in mind, regardless of what your final outcome is going to be, start collecting evidence and documentation. So if you see the first patient ever and you see they have some anomaly, and you don't even know in the future if you're going to write that, make sure you have enough evidence or photographs, etc., documentation as to who, what, how, why, how did that happen, everything. Make sure that is all there. Writing the research paper or case study, that is of course necessary for publishing. You'll have to sit down and write it in a scientific format, and it's the same format that I used as an example of the anatomy or physiology. Well, you do the introduction and then you say what you did. Then you comment on what your results were. Then you discuss how these results compare to what's out there, and then you conclude. Systematic presentation of excuse that typo, that's facts and ideas. So it's a systematic presentation. A research paper is not a haphazard put together facts here and there. I often see this when I'm reviewing someone's research that has come to me. And if it is very haphazard, that does not work. Someone who is not knowing that topic at all, they should be able to read that and understand what you did, and should be able to recreate your work if they have to, and approach the experts in the field for assistance. If you're not an expert in writing, reach out to someone who is. Reach out to your colleague who was good at writing in school, or reach out to a school and say, hey, this is what my research has been, and I need someone to review it and make sure it is scientifically written or valid. And there are people out there who will gladly do that. There's also writers available for pay, though it is not always approved of. There are something called as scientific ghostwriters, wherein you give them all the information, they will write it for you, but they won't be an author on that. And it's out there, but again, it's not a very approved idea. But if you are poor, or if you are not comfortable with writing, do that and make sure you read what they have written and ensure all the information is correct. Because again, finally, if your name is on that publication, you have to approve of what is written in there. But that is the last. Once you've published, you have contributed scientifically to the community and you're a published author. So with that, your research probably concludes at that point, until you come up with a new idea and you start this process all over again. With that, I would like to thank you for joining us today and listening to me patiently. And I will be willing to take any questions that anyone has now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Keyur, for taking us through that wonderful ride on, research writing, starting from the planning of the research itself, and taking us through the end, which is the publication and how to go about that. All right. Okay. So let me just see. Let's see. The first question is how important it is to write an impressive topic for the research. I think probably it means the title, because the title is something which should be something which is eye catchy. So, do you have some ideas or tips on that?
um, Especially if scientifically it shouldn't matter, it shouldn't be catchy. It Those are things that are frowned upon by the community. But yes, it's a catch 22, wherein if you want your paper to be read, you have to come up with acronyms like the contact lens study I was talking about. We call it CLAN, contact lens acceptance in neophytes. And yeah, that is, we did the CLAN study, that is catchy, or the blink study, bifocal lenses in nearsighted kids. So yeah, so it's a catch 22 wherein it shouldn't matter. However, it does matter sometimes. So it depends at what level you are working at. For your proposal, sure, it can be a bunch of words, they're not going to look at it. For publication, you might want to reconsider that. Having said that, don't let my advisor know I said this, because we all scientifically believe that it shouldn't matter. It should be simple and very self-explanatory itself. But yeah, it is, sometimes it gets very important to come up with something that is catchy in that sense.
Yeah, not always you should have some catchy, but I think the title should be more precise. That's what we are trying to say, right?
Yes, scientifically it should be precise and it shouldn't be misleading, like
Yeah.
using words like super quality contact lenses to fix myopia. Just say orthokeratology if that's what you mean.
Yeah.
Don't use vague words to make it catchy.
That's true. I think that's where some of the publications, when you read papers, when you read, you tend to lose interest just by, your title promised you so much, but then when you go reading to the abstract, this is not something which I was looking for, so
Mm-hmm.
you have to weigh your pros and cons. I mean, very rightly said, Keyur, we have to look into the both aspects. Right. Okay. Thank you. And let's take a look at another question. Do you think IRB, Institutional Review Board approval, is needed for all type of publications, or does it matter in terms of publications?
Um, yes and no. So if you're doing a literature review, or if you're doing a case studies or case series of 3 or less patients, you don't need any IRB approval, and that's kind of internationally accepted. Um, and having said that, there if you're doing clinical subjects, if you're touching a patient and doing anything to a patient, IRB approval most likely will be needed, especially in renowned journals. If a journal is not asking for IRB approval documentation, step back and look if the journal is actually a legit journal. There are a lot of fake journals out there, and you don't want your work, your effort to be just published randomly for like no recognition at all. So yeah, I do not know how it works in your area and if your local journals do not need it. But internationally, if you look at any of the journals that are read widely, like say OBS or IOVS or contact lens and anterior eye, any of these, one of the things you will have to submit while you submit your paper or your research paper would be the IRB approval. But yeah, literature reviews, etc., don't need that because you're not doing anything to a patient. You're just sitting home, reading some information, and compiling it for future audiences.
That's right. Okay, that help a lot. So if people who wants to get involved into clinical research where you are, going to test to the patients, touch the patients, perform any invasive or non-invasive procedures for that matter,
Mm-hmm.
it's good to have an IRB approval, because one thing is you're also backed up by the institution, and in fact they will guide you if you are right or wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
and and as you said, during publications, most of the journals need those cover letters and the supporting documents, and it's good to have them ready before you even plan up anything, right? Yeah.
Also, one of the other things is retrospective study. If you see something and you have patient data, you can, and you're like, I already have seen these patients, and I'm just going to look at their information. If you own the data, if you are a part of the clinic, there are different ways clinics define if they own the data or not. But if you can prove that you own that data, you can use it anonymously. But in an ideal world, it is best to call up those patients, say, hey, without your name and your information, anything identifiable, I'm going to use your corneal thickness measurements. Are you okay with that? And get any sort of approval on that sense, and that will help you a lot. So yeah, that is, retrospective studies are something that are, I would say, a gray area. Some people do manage to publish it without approvals, but at the same time, it's not hurting anyone. The activity has been done, and they are not giving any patient specifics. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think just connecting to that point, nowadays most of the clinics now have the consent form, where I have seen some places where they have already added a consent point where they say that the clinical examination results probably might be used for scientific purposes and research purposes. So people are doing that now, and if you are into clinical practice, I think it's good to have that, and it makes your
Mhm.
life much more easy to publish. I mean,
Yeah,
right?
I agree. It's like when you call up a call center and they're like, your call may be recorded for training and monitoring purposes. So
That's
just add that sentence and it might make your life a lot easier.
life much more easier. That's very true. Okay, let's look at another one. What are the essential elements to define a research which will be well approved? So again, any tips on how to make our research being approved well? I know you have covered many of the points, like look out for gaps in the research, not try to be more different. But anything you would like to add on this aspect?
So it depends at what level you are doing this research. If you're doing it for your clinic, you could get away with something very simple, just a little bit of change in what you're looking at, could be a significant one to get the research approved. If you're doing it for your optometry school, etc., depends on what they are looking at. They will often say that we need something new, we need something novel, or we need something, that can be done. Especially in the past year, I've heard on a distance, you don't have to go see the patients, etc. So make sure you satisfy that element first, because that is the first thing they're looking at. And as long as they see that, they will, as soon as they see that, they will be like, okay, we can read forward. If they don't see that, they're going to reject it. If you come up with an idea that is not feasible financially, if you say, okay, I need, 1,000 whatever currency per patient, then that's not something that the school has. That could be an essential element, or a machine that the school or the area we're working at doesn't have. So these are some things that, though in an ideal world, in an ideal scientific world, should not limit our scientific inquiry, but these are the harsh realities of what we live in. Having said that, um, read up on PICO standards, or what is the patient population, those things, like who's your patient or who's the population you'll be working on, what is the intervention you are doing, what is the comparison, like are you comparing it to another group or previously studied outcomes, etc., and the outcomes, what you'll be measuring. If you can definitely say what these four are in a very clear format, that will reduce all the vagueness and make sure that, as long as the idea is sound, it is going to be approved, because then you know exactly what you're doing.
That's right. Yeah. And again, it boils down to the very important aspect which you took into account, right, is the literature review. Know your literature and the gaps.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just reinforcing that because it's really important. Know what's the gap and how you are going to fill up that gap. If you are able to debate on that, if you are able to justify on what's available and what's not available, or how you're going to be different from others, it's going to be a very easy task after
Yep.
that to get it approved.
That should be a first step, because yeah, you are going to be questioned. If you are looking for approval, they're not going to let you away without questioning.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. A couple of more questions here. How to find publisher to publish? I think this question is, how would you probably select a journal to publish your article, if I may put it that way? Again, you can go hours and hours talking about it, I know, but just to give a gist of it, what do you think are the important criterias you will look at?
So to find a publisher to publish your article, you need to see where your citations are most coming from. So if you have 10 citations or 50 citations, look at your citations and see if they are mostly from one particular journal, or even like where is the most number of citations coming from. If you have 5 from one out of 50, then aim for those journals primarily, because the reason being, that your work aligns with those ideas. If they have already published something similar in that, then okay, what you're saying is what they are what the journal also publishes. So yeah, if you're working on retina prosthesis and you try and submit it to contact lens and anterior eye, they are not going to accept it. It's going to get rejected based of your time and their time. So the easiest way to understand who should be your ideal publisher is to look at that and work your way down that list. Sometimes nature papers are, one of your most citations, but if your work is not, if you're not very famous, etc., nature tends to rely on eye-catchy and breaking news kind of researchers. So if it's not there, they're not going to accept it. So work your way down that list to see what fits. That is the easiest way. Also, look at what level you are trying to publish at, or the audience you want to reach, because all this effort, the scientific work, is to reach an audience. And if you're trying to reach the common public, then look at publications that have open access, that everyone can read. If you're looking to reach a community of contact lens experts, then something from IACL or BCLA, etc., journals that cater to these audiences, you want to reach for that. So look at the audience you want to reach. That is the other important thing. And thirdly, there are costs involved, so also look at those if you have the resources for those costs, etc. And there are also fake journals out there, so be wary of that. Don't Make sure you're not submitting something to a fake journal. because they will publish your work and you will not own it at that point, and you will not have any credits for it as well. So yeah, that those are the short tips, but you should look YouTube this out as well. This is a well researched or well searched for topic. So yeah, there are some good YouTube videos as to how to look for where to publish.
Yeah, that's right. I think very well points which you have covered. The most important thing, as you said, we always forget our citations. I think that's the very key point. What you said, we must look out for which journals have published our citations. I mean, as you said, they align to our thoughts, so we align to their thoughts in the other way. Those journals would be some which you would probably put on the higher level when you want to think about publishing, which is really important. That's the point we normally miss. If we see 10 papers and then 10 papers have been published in optometry and vision science, I mean, you should try to aim for that, because it's very easy because you are aligning to them and they are publishing that kind of work. And the next thing, what just want to re-emphasize what you mentioned is on the specialization. So if you are looking for contact lens related paper, you can go in for. We are not saying that only contact lens journal will produce contact lens related papers. There are other journals which may also publish, but then as Keyur mentioned, to reach that target audience, you want to reach contact lens practitioners, and of course they will be reading contact lens and anterior eye probably more than any other journals, right? So very important points, Keyur. Thank you so much. Okay, one last question, which is very again important in terms of finding. We always have trouble in finding full text articles. So, any tips on what should we be doing? You did mention about end and or usage on our Google Scholar to at least get to that paper. But what comes across is we always land up in abstracts. So, how to get a full text? Any tips?
My suggestion is that try and look at different journals sometimes, um, and try and look at different journals to different sources. Like Google Scholar will not give you the right source, but if you just Google that name, you will have certain names that will certain places where the full text might be available. Also, something that is really helpful, and sometimes people forget this, is that reach out to the author if that email is present, or Google the author's name. And if you can reach out, one of the things that I was asked, or I was looking for a paper, and that journal was discontinued, and I couldn't find a copy of it whatsoever. I was like, I need this article, this is crucial, and the journal has been discontinued certain years ago. And especially in Demodex, when I was looking for it, the paper was like 1968 or something like that. And I realized one of the authors is still there, present. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to email them and see if they can send me a copy of their paper. They should have a copy of their paper. So yeah, if you are struggling, reach out, because I know, especially with Demodex blepharitis, though I'm not so though even the systematic review has been published, it's not freely available. But I am allowed as an author. These are the comments that if someone reaches out to me personally, then I cannot put it up on a website or something like that, but I can email a copy of it to you personally. So yeah, sometimes it's as easy as that. You can just explain, I'm looking for this information, I don't have access to it, can you please share it with me? And most of the times you'll be surprised that people do respond, and they'll be like, yeah, sure. I mean, they don't, it's not, the more someone reads their work, they'll be happy. So they're not going to refuse it unless there are legal implications that they have.
That's right. Yeah, I think very important point. Again, I think your answers are very bang on. I 120% agree to it. Writing to the authors, is very important. It not only opens up doors, but then I think sometimes they will help you out as well. They might direct you to other people who have probably done something, and it might this thing help you out with that. And I think one of the website which I would like to mention is register yourself to ResearchGate, if probably you all would want to, because there most of the researchers are there, and you can just send a message to them through ResearchGate if you probably don't have their emails, and they are very easy to communicate there. So if students are looking out for full text paper, ResearchGate is something apart from PubMed and Google Scholar and Cochrane Eye, if you want to look for systematic reviews. And I think Keyur, you did mention as well, reach out to your own optometry school as well, right? Because some of the
Mhm.
schools also, subscribe to some journals as a part of their library. So you can actually go on to your own school of optometry, or you can reach out to your friend's school. So maybe your school does not have that journal, your friend's school has it. So I mean, the source of information is out there. You just need to find some ways properly to get that information out. And if you need it, you might probably find it 90% of the times, right?
Agreed, agreed, very much agreed. Optometry schools are a very underlooked resource,
Yeah.
I believe, in India, especially in research. There are some good, strong ones, and yeah, you should just reach out and see if they have that access. And even sometimes, not just optometry schools. If you have ophthalmology schools and you're working in a hospital, ask your doctor. Your doctor saying, "Hey, your school is this and this," and they're right there, and they are most likely to have access to those journals as well. So yeah, ask the vicinity doctors or someone whom you know, and ask them if they can either connect you, or if their school has a membership, something like that, for their library, etc. So
Yeah.
definitely look into that.
Definitely helpful. All right. So I think we have taken almost all relevant questions for today. Thank you so much, Keyur, for giving us this time. It's a very early morning, Sunday early morning for you in the US, but you have been kind enough to take up this time and do a session for us and enlightening us. Again, why we plan to do this session, just to give you a brief, because this is the starting of the year. So people who are planning for research, starting of the year is something where you do new year resolutions and all that. So probably some of you might be enlightened with Keyur's talk to do some research resolutions. And all the best to all of you for your future research endeavors, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you everyone for listening. And yeah, if there are any other research questions, that I'll be glad to help outside of this. A lot of students very often reach out. And yeah, good luck. And I'm all about research. So yeah, let's move the scientific inquiry in optometry further ahead. Especially some South Asia countries have a huge population that is very less catered to. Like, we don't have prevalence data in a lot of areas, and these researches are very easy to conduct. So please go ahead and look for it, and go ahead and conduct those researches. So once we know what the problem is, because that's where we struggle in those countries, is we don't even know what the problem is, we can start looking for solutions. So yeah, thank you everyone.
Thank you so much, Keyur, for that kind thoughts and words. We do have sessions planned next weekend. Take care until then. Stay safe. I will see you all again next weekend. Bye bye.